Survival games, once a bastion of freedom, a sanctuary for systemic gameplay. Now, a hollow cash grab waiting out on the street corner of Gameland to hoodwink a naive gamer, aka you. So how did this happen? How did the purest of recent game genres become so sullied and fall to forever early access? Before I kick off this rant, let me first establish some groundwork. What are survival games? What do I mean by systemic gameplay? And what in the hell is a hoodwink? Survival games are games in which survival is a core gameplay element. Generally, they throw the hapless player, you, into an unforgiving and hostile open world, with status bars like health and hunger to manage and aggressive enemies hiding behind every tree trunk. Normally these games start the player with nothing and force them to explore their surroundings, to scavenge the materials needed to craft the equipment they need to survive, with better equipment allowing you to harvest better resources to then make better equipment, which will then let you harvest better resources ad infinitum. It's an incredibly intuitive gameplay loop that just works so well and can lead to countless hours of entertaining gaming, as you strive to just get that last diamond for your suit of diamond armor. Systemic gameplay is a huge part of survival games, this being gameplay that derives as a secondary outcome of a game's natural systems and the player's actions. Think setting enemies on fire with lightning bolts in The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild, or a failed stealth kill leading to minutes on end of intense hide and seek in Hitman. These moments aren't scripted or planned, they just happen naturally as players f*** around in the world. These systems in survival games allow players to tell their own stories and add excitement and tension in a world that could otherwise feel flat and lifeless. The word hoodwinked means to deceive or bamboozle an idiot, often a gamer.
This originates from an Old English meaning of the word wink, to block sight for extended periods of time.
So, survival games are a massive thing now. It seems like every other game in Steam's early access is a miscellaneous survival crafter, never destined to see a full release. We're going to have to dust off the time machine because it's time to go back in time to the time of 1992. Unreal World is a proper old school game with ASCII graphics and a real heavy rogue inspiration. Unreal World puts the player in the shoes of one of 10 early Finnish cultures, giving them an era-appropriate job to complete, like fisher or tradesman. In Unreal World, you roam a procedural world, desperately trying not to die of frostbite. A 1996 update added survival mechanics that wouldn't feel unfamiliar to the modern-day soft gamer. A crafting and shelter building system and a starvation meter to be filled by hunting and feasting on the local flora and fauna. 2003 brought another innovation in survival gameplay with Worm Online, developed by Rolf Janssen and Marcus Persson. Remember this guy? He will be back soon. In this massively multiplayer online game, players exist within a persistent, regrowing world. They use the natural resources around them to eke out a living and survive or thrive, depending on whether the other players leave their base when they're not online. This online world is another development that will feel very homogeneous to survival games nowadays, with more recent online games like Ark Survival Evolved and Palworld carrying the torch of letting players grief the ever-loving shit out of each other. Player interaction, generally in the hostile sense, but occasionally in the PvE sense, brought another layer of entertainment to survival games and has been a staple of the genre ever since. Remember Marcus Persson? I told you to remember him earlier. Remember? He's just your average Swedish programmer, better known by his online alias, Notch. After leaving the Worm Online team of 2, he went on to create what is arguably the pinnacle of the genre. A game that has sold over 300 million copies and has its own cultural significance section on its Wikipedia page. I am of course talking about
No, don't do that. Oh dear. Minecraft found an itch that we all have, to run away to the woods, to be free of responsibility, not caught up in the monotonies of the real world. We can explore, we can struggle, we can find true adventure. Minecraft perfects the work to reward ratio. Nothing takes so much effort so as to be insurmountable in a short time frame, and yet nothing is so easy that the satisfaction, the payoff at the end is meaningless. To an extent, I think this breaks down at later points in the game, such that very few of us have ever gotten to the point of tackling the Ender Dragon survival mode. It just takes that little bit too much effort, too much work, too much time. The grind starts to become pain. I adore Minecraft. I've probably spent more time in this game and its many mods than I have any other. I still remember my first little Minecraft house, built down by the river. My first adventures into the Nether through the portal I built on top of the hill. Getting lost in the desert to the east, and the string of torches I let to lead me home before I understood how the coordinate system worked. I love creating. I always have. I love to explore. I love fantasy. I'm not alone in this, as Minecraft's massive success demonstrates. It is, in many ways, the definitive survival game. Nearly everything afterwards has been chasing that open feeling, putting as few constraints on the players as possible, presenting an open and interesting world to explore. But Minecraft did it so perfectly that it still has millions of players today.
One of my favourite experiences with survival mechanics comes from the Skyrim mods Frostfall, Campfire, Realistic Needs and Diseases, and Hunterborn. This combination worked together, adding hunger, temperature, and sleep needs, while providing the camping, clothing, and food sources needed to satisfy them. It changed the way I saw Skyrim's world. A river becomes impossible to cross without a bridge, as wading through it is a death sentence for your cold exposure. An elk is a valuable source of meat for food and a pelt for a tent. Mountainous regions become difficult to traverse without proper equipment, meaning the destination becomes much more of a reward. Making the long journey from Whiterun to Winterhold requires planning rations and camping supplies, and leaves you thankful for any inn that you find along the way. This in turn got me to engage with a lot of the smaller side quests that litter Skyrim's map. I think this is quite a rare example of blatantly tacked on survival mechanics, bringing quite a lot to a game, but perhaps only because I, as the player, have explicitly chosen to engage with them. On the complete other end of the survival spectrum, my favourite game in the genre is the punishing semi-simulation The Long Dark. You're plonked down in the middle of the snowy Canadian wilderness after a geomagnetic storm has left the landscape without human survivors. What the game lacks in story, it makes up for with tough, realistic survival mechanics. You have to gather materials from the wilderness, scavenge what you can from the leftover settlements, and try to avoid any dangerous wildlife. There's no base building, weapon customization, or even much crafting. It's streamlined survival. It's just you against nature. Very small mistakes in, for example, food preparation can lead to injury or disease, requiring recovery that eats into your precious time for survival essentials like firewood gathering. The wildlife is often hostile, with bears, wolves, and moose all ready to charge at you and leave you on your last legs. It's difficult, and the longest I've survived is maybe 30 days. But the well-crafted locations, stylized graphics, minimal HUD, and calming soundtrack create an atmosphere like that of the winter power cut that you dreamt of as a kid, letting you answer the question of how well you could survive in it. I'll admit, it's not for everyone. There's very little space to relax in the world. You can spend your time in the safe and warmish interiors of trailers and small huts, but every minute that you spend there is one where you're not gathering materials, and that eventually is going to catch up to you. In The Long Dark, you never stop needing to survive, and I think that's what sets it apart from other games in the genre.
I think that the appeal of the survival game is also their inevitable downfall. They imply freedom. They give you a chance to put your skills, your problem solving, to the test. Capturing this is inherently challenging, as games, by their nature, have to be limited. Game files can only be so large. There are only so many assets, so many cards or arrangements of board tiles. Eventually, you hit the wall. You see past the illusion. You suddenly feel funneled into one direction. This is the issue with Minecraft in later stages of play. Your struggle becomes limited to grinds for slightly better gear, for more obscure potions, building some megastructure, or going to kill the Ender Dragon. And to an extent, that's the issue with survival games as a whole. We've hit the wall. How many more you get a spaceship and take it to the Black Games are we gonna have? The concept clearly massively appeals. We all want to be Han Solo, we all want to be Captain Kirk or Jean-Luc Picard, but can we follow through on this desire for adventure with the technology and game design at the point that it is? Minecraft deliberately limited its scope and in doing so massively opened it. By having such a limited block set, simple tools, weapons and armour, you felt like you weren't that limited. Iron armour is iron armour after all. How many different variants can you get? Whereas an F1027 laser carbine, no matter how beautiful, how high graphic-y it is a very specific weapon that there should be umpteen different versions of. You feel those limits. And that has become the problem of the genre. Every game promises a new free adventure, and yet recycles the same mechanics and capabilities without enough of a leap to push back the walls. These constraints hamper a lot of games made by smaller developers. Take Stranded Deep, by reputation, a strong entry in the genre. And who doesn't want to see how they fare on a desert island? There's a reason we love survival stories. It has mass appeal. However, there's a limit on what you can build. There isn't a freeform raft builder where you can throw together everything you want and see if it floats. You can't tear your shirts into the exact strips you need to tie knots. You can't take a leaf and fashion it into a sword. You can't... befriend a pod of dolphins and train them to use synchronized swimming to communicate with a nearby boat to come and get you. What I'm trying to say is the limitations of modern systems and what any studio, even a AAA studio, can produce means that your problem solving, your adventure is inherently limited. And as a result, it feels gamey when survival to an extent relies on immersion. I must admit, I loved the idea of Stranded Deep. I bought it, started it up, dragged myself onto a desert island, and then couldn't pick anything up. Searching for what was wrong with the control broke the illusion. It showed me instantly that there were limits. It spoiled my immersion, which is what I was craving. And it wasn't Stranded Deep's fault, it's probably a problem with my PC. But it showed me instantly that when I'm playing a survival game, when I'm looking for that freedom, it's not really there. Survival games are a false promise. And bringing it full circle, that is why the genre feels so stale. What killed survival games? We did. Because they're trying to satisfy an itch that can't really be satisfied. Even in real life, there are limits. We've done most survival quirks. We've done survival post-apocalypse, survival pre-apocalypse, survival in space, survival in the ocean, survival in the block world. And when we get a new entry into each sub-genre, does it actually push the limits back far enough that we can pretend they aren't there again? Or is it just the last survival game, but now with X? I wonder almost if we need to let the genre lay for 10 years. If we let technology, game design, move ahead. Let the ground lay and let some true maverick bring us a new definitive game. Maybe we'd get that feeling back and we could wander around in worlds afresh with adventure and danger and wonder until we tire out the genre again.